So, welcome everybody to MindShifters Radio. And today is Monday, March the 16th, 2026. I'm glad you're here. Hi, Susan, Melissa, and Michael. Everybody's a little late getting in here today.
Hey, dear heart. Excited to hear what comes next in the book.
You want me to go for it?
Sure, well, maybe check in and see if Melissa or Susan have anything to share.
Sure. Did you all get your books yet?
Yes, with such nice notes and everything, Jeanie. Thank you so much.
You sound like you're a little hoarse today.
I have the flu.
Oh, no.
Ouch.
Yeah,
Bless your heart.
thanks.
Leaning out another layer.
There's been a lot of layers.
I understand. Like that answer I got back a little while ago when I was my frustration came about, I have to deal with this again. And how long is this going to take? And the answer came back, how long have you been away? I was like, yeah.
Right.
How many generations has it been since we ate of the fruit of the tree of perception?
Yeah.
And gave up our direct breath connected world.
So how are you two? And how's Juanita is on and Melissa is on. And who is that with the R?
Regina. Yeah. You talked to us last week a time or two. Welcome back, Regina and Melissa, Anita. Anyone, anything exciting to share? Anything going on in your world that you'd have a thought about? Regina? Welcome.
There I am. Finally. Oh, okay. It's too much. I'm too much thinking about.
You mean you're in process?
Oh, deep process.
That's awesome. It's a wondrous place to be.
Yeah, Confucius said that when he was 70, he had it all together because he started at age 16. And I'm 90, I'm way behind. But I realized that this processing never stops. There's no end to it. And so I think Confucius, if he did it at 70, that's way beyond me. But anyway, it's just amazing how in order to take one step forward, you got to step back 2 steps.
Sometimes, yeah.
The past is prologue. And when you realize, if you do the numbers, just go back 4 generations and what's in our genes, but 31 lives, mom and dad, their moms and 4 generations, that's 30. I mean, every thought, every feeling, every reality, every unresolved situation of the 30 lives that went before us is in our genes. Yeah. And then, of course, when you look at where did the 4th generation back get their thoughts, feelings, errant perceptions, and you go back just 30 generations, you talk about 1.6 billion people in our bloodline. So it's a fairly significant project to do. Yeah.
Well, just accepting that idea takes a lot of labor, just that one thing alone.
Yeah. But to me, it also eases it because you realize, there's a work to be done. So now I'll just do the work.
Absolutely.
And have patience with it, realize that I may be some time before I work through this thing that I want an instant pill for.
Yeah. It's a patience thing.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So anything we can support you with what you're processing?
Just being here.
Cool. Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else anything to share? Anything exciting happening in your world?
Hi. I'll jump in.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm eating blueberries and I look like I have like purple lipstick on. That's really cool. It's interesting because boy, am I ever noticing now when something triggers me. which is really fun that I'm noticing it and able to identify what's happening. And so that, I guess that's what's exciting for me, is that it's really like right away I'm like, oh, what's this? What's happening? Okay, what is this feeling? And so that I can jump into a worksheet really quickly. Whereas before I'd be upset and I'd, just mull it over for a long time and kind of go deep into it. And now it's shifted. It's not really happening like that anymore. So I'm super excited, and it's all because of this
Nice.
yeah. So thank you,
That's
thank you,
awesome.
thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome that you've chosen to step in and go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it's not fun, but it's okay. It's
Exactly. Well, it's better than just being lost in it, that you can start to extract yourself and recognize what's going on, and
yeah.
that there's work to be done. And for me, I'm actually doing some writing on the It's All Greek to Me book, and realizing the moment that's described as we fell from grace is the moment where we got stuck without breath in perception, in the constructs of our minds. That's the eating of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And we're designed not to live there, but in breath. And when breath moves, whatever's going on in the perceptual system that's just a reflection of the past gets resolved on the spot. So it's an interesting process for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Welcome, Canny. We've just been chatting so far. Anything for you to share?
No, good morning, everybody.
Oh, good morning. How you be?
I'm all right. I'm still in bed this morning listening, but it's
No,
only 10 o'clock here, so
good for you. Well, rest and relax. Anything to share?
no, not really.
Well, let's turn it over to Jeanie then to read for us. Hey, dear heart.
Hi. Okay, we are stepping into the fourth or the last section, and it says what to expect in these last four chapters of this book. The last four chapters of this book explain how I am healing. Chapter 9 is called Healing the Generations, what we were just talking about. The majority of my issues did not begin with me, but were already in my bloodline. Nevertheless, I took them up as if they were my own. I carried forward the patterns, pain, and beliefs that were not originally mine, but that had become woven into my story at a very young age. Now I choose to face each issue as it arises, doing the work necessary to release both the issues that originated with me and those I inherited. My deepest desire is for the cycle of craziness to end so that the next generations, beginning with my son and grandchildren, can step into life with a pure, clean slate. They deserve to live free of those fetters, and my healing includes giving them that freedom. The chapter 10 is called Be Aware. There are several areas within me that still call for strengthening and healing. For instance, I still want to become more aware of what is real. I want to become more aware of the urge to withdraw when life feels overwhelming, and aware of my sometimes unreasonable drive to please others at a cost to myself. I am still working on being aware of how much energy I spend reacting to my past instead of living in the present. And I continually remind myself of who I really am beneath my masks and stories. Most of all, I work to maintain awareness of truth, as it is truth that keeps me willing to heal. Chapter 11 is going to be Breathe, Forgive, Let Go, Cancel, and this is the longest chapter in the book. In the chapter entitled Who Was I? Who Did I Think I Was? We may hear the questions, who do I think I am? Who am I really? And do I matter? These are not just passing thoughts, they are deepest cries of the heart. In this chapter, I begin to face those questions directly by introducing the use of the wake-up sheets to launch us into the forgiveness process itself. False beliefs are identified as the objects of this healing work. This is where layers of illusion are peeled back one by one so that the truth may shine where lies once lived. Chapter 12 is 5 measures. In one of the most powerful breath sessions of my life, I heard a message as clearly as if someone were standing right beside of me, speaking into my ear. It said, "You will expand in 5 measures." The words carried weight, resonance, and truth, though at first I had no idea of what they meant. Were they about time, music, energy, growth? As I sat with the words, I realized they were an invitation. 5 measures became a symbol of rhythm, balance, grace, and movement. Just as music is divided into measures that organize tempo and flow, my own life has been guided into a new phase of awareness, trust, will, safety, and incarnation. Each measure builds on the last, carrying me forward into the fullness of being. This chapter explores what it means to expand, not by striving harder, but by allowing love to open me, stretch me, and reform me. Expansion is not random. It is the intentional unfolding of who I was created to be. With each measure, I step closer to reclaiming my true identity, not as a victim of the past, but as a living presence of love in the world. We'll go into chapter 9, healing the generations, the generational issues manifesting in my life. In Greek mythology, Pandora opens a box or a jar and releases all manner of sickness, death, and evils. When I began my journey of healing, I often asked myself why had I opened my personal Pandora's box? Why not leave it closed and move on instead of reviving the horrors? Thinking of Pandora's box as a metaphor for the unconscious, I realized my early life was an unconscious replication of someone else's past, amplified and played out again in my life. Once I opened the box, I realized what had been locked in. I could not close it fast enough. However, I couldn't leave it closed, as generational patterns had already been running my life on the unconscious level. In the 10 Commandments, God tells us that the sins of the parents are visited upon the children to the 3rd and 4th generation. In other words, the unresolved, out-of-harmony patterns of our forebears set up disintegrative energies that were then passed on to us, even though we ourselves may never have generated those same patterns. Put another way, our ancestors' genetic and energetic structures, shaped by misalignment rather than love, are transmitted to us much like physical traits such as eye color. Scientific studies on epigenetics support this and add that we all have genes that are decorated with chemical modifications that regulate how, where, and when the gene is turned on and off. It is heartening to realize that while these modifications may be passed from generation to generation, they are reversible. The way our body reads our DNA is not unalterable. The National Human Genome Research Institute affirms this. Behavior and environment can cause changes that impact the way the genes work. Taking epigenetics a step further, research shows that stress and other traumatic experiences biologically embed themselves in select genes and are passed on to subsequent generations. Thus, one's environmental influences, including mental and emotional input, greatly impact the biological factors that make up what is called genetics. Thanks to medical research, we now know that genes can be manipulated to obtain better outcomes and improve life. A large part of any reprogramming includes identifying the markers that control gene expression and the anticipated outcome. The changes made might be surgical, pharmacological, or psychological. Studying the role of genetics in our development may lead us to understanding the possible causes of genetic abnormalities and disorders and give us insight on how to deal with these. I will focus for now on just 3 of my generations. My maternal grandmother, widowed with 3 children, took work as a cook in a restaurant during the Depression. Despite long hours, the $11 a week that she made left her struggling to pay rent and feed her children. My mother was the youngest of these 3 children and was often left alone in a movie theater while her mother worked. She shared stories with me of how she hid excuse me.
We're holding this space, sweetie, and breathing with you. Dipping into the next layer.
She shared stories with me of how she hid in the theater's bathroom for hours to get away from lecherous older men. She was filled with fear to the point of living in survival mode most of her life. She married young, and within 2 years she had 2 babies and was managing alone because my father was drafted into the Army. Like her mother, she did not know how she would survive. I was my parents' second baby. And from as early as I can remember, I felt afraid, putting me in survival mode just as my mother and grandmother had been. While I was never privy to any information about sexual or abuse issues that my mother and grandmother may have had, I surely picked up on the anxiety of both my mother and grandmother that they felt as a result of being abandoned, even if not by their husband's choice, and having had to make a living on their own. There was a burden of responsibility that rested on them alone as they struggled to survive while raising children. I found I had a powerful wish to heal these forceful influences. Was I unconsciously attempting to help the family by removing myself and allowing someone else to support me, or was I running away? Or both? I figured the quickest way to lift a burden off my family was for me to marry early in life. This I did, but to a man who would abuse and abandon me. The old unhealthy script was playing out yet again. As I mentioned earlier, one of the ways I used to keep from feeling the full impact of Cain's sexual abuse was to dissociate, and I became very good at this. So much so that I eventually had to be taught ways to keep from dissociating, to maintain full conscious awareness of the present moment. I taught myself to notice 3 things I could see, hear, touch, smell, and taste, and to remind myself of my current chronological age, which was no longer the ages of 16 to 19 when the abuse had occurred. Instead of going numb and splitting off, I learned to practice being aware by taking a deep breath, pausing at the top of the inhale, then exhaling slowly. This would bring me into the present and strengthen my ability to face present stressful situations. It also allowed me to distinguish between the past and the present. These experiences of being repeatedly violated and suffering an early miscarriage wreaked havoc on my body and reproductive organs. Even though I removed myself from the situation, I remained so afraid that I moved constantly to different apartments and cities trying to feel safe. After 3 years on my own, I remarried. After 9 years of trying to conceive with no success, my second husband and I discovered that my reproductive organs were so damaged that I had to have surgery. Soon after I had gotten well, I found I was pregnant with twins, only to lose a little daughter at 4 months. I interrupt my story to tell how a powerful example of generational response appeared in my son. From his earliest years, even in daycare, he always needed to have a girlfriend. When he reached his teens, we discussed this fact, and he told me he had always known he had lost his sister. It was as if he carried a memory of his twin within him, causing him to have a deep drive not to be alone. But to stay connected to the feminine presence that he and she had once shared. whether understood through science as emotional or epigenetic imprinting or through spirit as energy of soul memory. My son's life reflected how deeply our generational experiences and losses continue to echo through the lives of those who come after us. Returning to my story, after the birth of our son, I was full of joy, and yet physically I continued to have issues to the point where I had to have a complete hysterectomy. To my surprise, even though I no longer had my reproductive organs, I continued experiencing pain, cramps, and aching in my hips and pelvic area. Though this pain and disease subsided over time, the process of writing this book has pushed me to do more mental and emotional healing work. Yes, opening my Pandora's box has meant experiencing the same symptoms I had had before. My paternal grandparents lived in a 3-bedroom farmhouse with 12 children. They had no indoor plumbing, no running water, and no electric heat. They farmed the land, growing most of their food, raising chickens, cows, and hogs. Working together with their neighbors, barns were raised and crops were harvested. Volunteers were paid with food, and neighbors helped one another. Horses were used to plow fields. The kids had to do chores before school and couldn't participate in sports or other activities as they were needed at home to do evening chores. It was a challenging life for all of them, and I'm sure they feared for their survival. When I was 11 years old, my parents bought a house in Bristol, Virginia, about an hour from the family farm. My dad was the first to go to college, and he was extremely proud of his success as an accountant and a tax advisor or assessor. However, working the fields and raising cattle had always given him a peace he could not find in the business world. The farm, which his parents left to him and his siblings, continued to feel like home for him. Whether my dad's goal was to have peace or simply to work on the farm, I'm not sure. But this goal drove him to return to the farm whenever he could. He often went to the farm on weekends. After he retired, he spent most of the week there. This habit of leaving and going somewhere else became my way of coping with stress when life seemed challenging as well. Dad was also a giver, but he had difficulties receiving. He felt he had to work to earn whatever he received. I adopted that same belief. Yet Scripture tells us, now to him, God, who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that works in us. My interpretation that Dad's leaving meant he wanted to get away from me, created the perception that Dad was abandoning me when he went to the farm. I wonder now if Mom felt that too, since she stayed in Bristol with the children instead of going with him. Abandoning us was not Dad's intention. He was going to the farm. His going to the farm had nothing to do with me or us. It was personal for him and not intended to be negative toward us. We simply didn't understand this. Now that I can see the other side of the story, I can stop creating circumstances where I perceive that men abandon me, physically, mentally, or emotionally. Scripture says, the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Let us remember we are speaking God's name with every breath. The Lakota have a phrase, Matakwayasan, which means all my relations. I want to heal all my generations, forward and backward. Healing for me means that I am protected and safe enough that I can go back and face what is in my unconscious and release the memories that generated my fears, knowing now that these are just memories of experiences. I tell myself, I survived the actual experience, so I will survive the memories. Is this possible? Yes, but it requires willingness to do the work. Isaiah 59 reminds us, behold, the Lord's hand is not shortened that it cannot save, nor his ear dull that it cannot hear, but your iniquities have made a separation between you and your God. God does not move away from us. We move away from God. We are now invited to get back into a connected relationship with God, who is our source and creator. He gave us Ruach to dwell within us, to guide us, to teach us, and to undo what we cannot undo on our own. Our part is to be willing first to let go and then to ask for help to do the rest. Eckhart Tolle said, sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. And Thich Nhat Hanh said, people have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. Notice the word familiar has a root in Latin referring to a household or what is intimate, family. In a negative way, then, our generational passed down lies are also familiar lies, and we have taken those lies as truth. Usually, although not always, it is a parent who becomes a power person when he or she is not functioning out of love in a particular moment. Since this person had more power over our lives than we did, we may have perceived an upsetting or uncomfortable situation with them as extremely dangerous, if not a threat to our survival. Watching how this power person acted when in this less than loving state, we learned their destructive behaviors that they used to win over us. Later in life, should our own stress increase, we might automatically mimic our power person's behaviors without thinking. At this point, the unconscious is running our lives. As Dr. Michael Ryce has noted, when there is no stress, we will do what we always do to get along with our power person. For me, that meant being the good little girl and doing what I was told. Should stress start to build, I might do something to resist my power person, which in my case was to argue silently, definitely not out loud. Turn away and give an irritated huff, or give them the look, but definitely not to their face. Finally, when in an ultra-stressed situation, I might mimic the very destructive behavior that my power person used against me that I hated the most. For me, this was to withdraw or leave, sometimes geographically to another room, and sometimes just inwardly within myself. I'm going to pause there. I see Regina's got a hand up. Did you have a question or a comment? You got to unmute, sweetie.
Yeah, there's so many questions and I don't want to disturb your flow.
No, that's fine.
Well, one question, I am an only child. I mean, I have no children. So there's no lineage going forward. And I'm glad for that. I'm sort of the end point in my lineage. But I'm also feeling or wondering if that makes it even a greater load for me. I chose not to have children. And some people say that means something, but I'm just curious what either one of you would say. That was just one question. And the other one was, I don't have any memory, conscious memory of sexual abuse, but I've always wondered if somewhere hidden deep down there may be in the lineage. And not that I need to know that at this moment, but it's always been a question in my mind. Am I so, afraid of it or something like that, that I'm just not willing to go there, or it's going to come up later, or digging deeper will get me there? I don't want to turn my life into a constant self thing.
Well, I could look at it that if there's something there that you need to look at or deal with, it will come forward on its own without you having to go digging. And it won't come forward unless you're strong enough and vital enough to deal with it at that time. Because, if we have, say, a vitality meter from 0 to 10, and we're only at a 5, we will never see our 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 issues until we become more vital. That's why sometimes as we are doing more of the right things and we're getting more vital, then stuff comes up again and it's like, I thought I had dealt with that. And, maybe we had to the level that we could deal with it. But once we're more vital, then the next layer of it comes forward for us to look at. And so if something comes up and is in your face, then you can be confident that it wouldn't be there unless you had the ability to handle it. And the Creator tells us that He won't put more on us than we're able to bear. And I think that's what He means.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you.
Yeah. And as far as the generations go, even if you don't have, biological children, I am sure, Regina, that you have impacted so many lives of people, whether they were children or young adults or people your age or whatever. And so cleaning your field will send out a vibration that brings them into a clearer perspective as well. So even if it's not in the generational line, anybody that you're in contact with that has the same issues, if you've cleared up that issue, then it helps them, it opens the space easier for them to clear it up as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Course of
Anybody
Miracles
else?
offers the thought that when you're healed, you are never healed alone, and that millions yet unborn will benefit from the work you do. So I think even if we don't have that biological connection, we all come from the same blood, from the same source, and are
Same
part of one whole. And as
one big
each
family.
cell in the whole does its work, then the whole moves forward.
Yeah. I think of it as one big family.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
I've also used a visual of, as a whole, here we are on a ladder. Somebody may be way ahead of us on the steps, and we may be at the bottom of the ladder, but each person on each rung of that ladder that takes a step forward carries the whole forward, whatever level we're at. And the
Right.
more committed we are, the more of an impact we can have on getting to that point that Yeshua, the physicist, talked about of a little leavening leavens the whole loaf. When we can get enough of that incarnation. And Jeanie shared that she was told she would incarnate in 5 measures, incarnating as love in a world that habitually devoids, is void of love and has all kinds of cheap substitutes. But when we each step into and incarnate physiologically in this world, and we do that through the breath, then the whole moves forward. So thank you for the work you've been doing for so many years. I'm thinking what your first intensive at Heartland was probably, I don't know, going back 30 years, 30 some years. Yeah. So cool to be hanging out with you that long.
Working.
Yeah. Sweet. Awesome.
Terry has his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Jeanie, again for doing this and being willing to experience all that you're experiencing. I want to offer something from the man's side, the male side of this dynamic. I come from a lineage of abused women, and the abuse happened prior to my birth, on back and up through, the years. One of the things that really helped me to be a better person was the understanding of the law of resonance. After learning that through the workshops with Michael and then reflecting on my relationships, every single woman I've ever had a relationship with, whether it was just 30 days of dating, I've reflected back on it, had a background of trauma and abuse. And it put a responsibility on me to assist in that healing. Now, even before I knew it, the horrible violence and atrocities that I witnessed against my mother instilled in me the deep desire to never, ever injure a woman, never be that guy. And I was able to maintain that. I still lost my temper and got triggered and all that good stuff, and was a screaming banshee, what have you. But the message is that once Pandora's box is opened, no matter which direction or perspective, then I can't avoid it, and I have a choice to make. How do I handle that? Do I help or do I hurt? And it's a lot there. And I think it's a lot that men don't get to express, or they're afraid to express, or they're side. The women seem to have, and I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but they're able to express their emotions a little bit better than most guys, and that's a real challenge. But again, I just want to put that piece out there. Any guys out there, take a look at your relationships, see what you can do to be better. And thank you, Jeanie. I'm gonna let you continue
Thank
now.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Terry. I always considered my mom to be my power person because she was good at giving the look or the irritated huff. She also might withdraw a bit. However, I later saw that my dad's habit of leaving felt to me like a power person behavior, and that this was what I really wanted to do when my stress level was high. We can have different power persons in different arenas of life. We can even change power persons. They can be teachers, peers, siblings, higher officers in service, bosses, or even spouses. In my first marriage, my husband Kane came to function for me as a power person. At first, I was the good girl or wife and obeyed him to avoid abuse. Eventually, however, I had no choice but to fight to survive. Finally, in keeping with my dad's way of dealing with stress, I left. Even now, when I feel my back is against the wall or find that there is no escape from a perceived attack, I still go into anger, which really covers fear. Yes, while I dislike confrontation, especially criticism, I will automatically defend myself. And when the stress reaches a certain level of intensity, I will leave. The following passages from A Course in Miracles, Lesson 153, In My Defenselessness, My Safety Lies, helps clarify this. The world gives rise but to defensiveness. For threat brings anger. Anger makes attack seem reasonable, honestly provoked, and righteous in the name of self-defense. Yet is defensiveness a double threat, for it attests to weakness and sets up a system of defense that cannot work. Now are the weak still further undermined, for there is treachery without and still a greater treachery within. The mind is now confused and knows not where to turn to find escape from its imagings or imaginings. Today, our theme is defenselessness. We clothe ourselves in it as we prepare to meet the day. We rise up strong in Christ and let our weakness disappear as we remember that His strength abides in us. We will remind ourselves that He remains beside us through the day and never leaves our weakness unsupported by His strength. We call upon His strength each time we feel the threat of our defenses undermine our certainty of purpose. We will pause a moment as He tells us, I am here. When Michelangelo was asked how he created the statue of David, he said David was already present in the stone. All he had to do was chip away all the parts that weren't David. He said, every block of stone has a statue in it, and it's the task of the sculptor to release it. He also said, I saw the angel in the marble, and I carved until I set it free. In a way, Michelangelo seems to be saying that we are always intact. Our essence is and always has been pure and perfect. Our work, like Michelangelo's, is to chip away everything that is not love. A closing reflection to this chapter. May our awareness give birth to compassion, our compassion awaken courage, and our courage lead us to act in love. Healing is not only possible, it is inevitable when we remember who we truly are. Each breath is a new beginning, and with every breath taken in love, we heal the generations. And I'll pause and see if anybody wants to add anything or has a question before I go to the next chapter. Okay. Chapter 10, Be Aware. Following are several things that I want to strengthen and heal. To become aware of what is real. That's number one. The sexual abuse I experienced impacted me in many areas of my life outside of the bedroom. A good example occurred 44 years after my last experience of being abused. I was facilitating a breath session with several people, and the woman I was coaching started thrashing and screaming and pulling out her hair. I attempted to hold her and speak calmly to bring her back to actuality. In this wild state, she was so much stronger than I was, and I was concerned she would hurt both herself and me. She was so activated by the reality in her mind that she was beyond reasoning, and her behavior was pure madness. While I managed to look as if I was in control, I was losing it inside. My inner turmoil became, wait, the screen just skipped. My inner turmoil became like her outer behavior. I was silently screaming, thrashing, and going insane. My partner came over and took control of the situation, and I fled upstairs to my room, shaking and in tears. I knew enough to know that in that state, I would be no good to the other participants. I called a friend, who also happens to be a psychologist, and I told him about the woman and the situation downstairs. He knew by my voice that I was lost in my own panic. First, he reminded me that the situation upstairs was the only one I could change. He said, "Jeanie, take 3 deep breaths." He paused while I did that. "Now look around the room you're in. Name 3 things you can see." He paused. "Name 3 things you can hear." Pause. "Now name 3 things you can touch." Pause. "Now name 3 things you can smell." Pause. Breathe deeply. My friend had me repeat this sequence until he was convinced I was actually present. And then he talked me through my thoughts behind the panic and fear. Though what came out during this processing had nothing to do with the woman downstairs. She had triggered memories of when my first husband became so absorbed in his reality that he would go crazy and things would spin out of my control. I had not been strong enough to defend myself, and talking had not helped. I had gotten physically hurt. My ability to survive by escaping had been strong, but the thought that I would not survive had been even stronger. So I remained in the abusive situation for 3 years. When I finally got out, I pushed down all these emotions and thoughts, hoping to forget them altogether, so that I could control as much in my environment as possible in order to stay safe. When things got beyond my control, fear or panic would set in, often masked behind anger. I then realized that Cain's rage was how he won over me. To this day, I despise the anger that comes up when I think I'm cornered. When I am afraid, my first instinct, even now, is to look for a reason to leave. Whether it's to leave the bedroom, the house, or even my body, this has been my default in order to protect myself. The woman with whom I'd been doing the breath session was my perfect trigger. She outwardly portrayed what had been going on inside of me all these years. I want to remove the pure madness of my upset in order to stop recreating it in my world. I want to embrace it to heal it. I want to give myself permission to feel what is real. Can I do that? Can I learn to do reality checks to become more aligned with actuality and reinforce distinctions between the present situation and past experiences? Do I dare take new risks with intimacy? This does not mean with a partner. There is intimacy in every relationship. Into me see. Do I let another person get close enough to see the real me? Can I ever trust another person with my being? The demands placed on me in that first marriage felt like threats to my very survival. In response, I feigned independence and acted with false bravado, all the while feeling that I was trying to run a marathon without being able to put one foot in front of the other to even get out of the starting gate. Now that the situation with Cain is in the past, I'm taking baby steps, realizing that occasional falls are part of learning to walk. I am slowing down the inner chatter that has continued to divert me from what is real, and I am keeping my eyes open and breathing deeply in order to stay more in the present. The second thing, to become aware of the urge to withdraw or leave. For me, leaving, dissociating, can still be an immediate response to a perceived threat. A scientific explanation of how the body's automatic physical response works can be found in Carl Lashley and Walter Penfield's work on neuropsychology, in which they note that long-term memories are stored throughout the brain, not just in one part of it. Groups of neurons are primed to fire together in the same pattern that created the original experience, and each component of a memory is stored in the brain area that initiated it. Groups of neurons in the visual cortex store a sight. The amygdala stores associated emotion, etc. The memories are stored redundantly in different parts, like a backup drive, so that if one engram gets wiped out, an alternative path can be used to retrieve the memory. It is not like library books sitting on a shelf that are all kept in one place. A memory is reconstructed through the various parts. The more a piece of information is used or repeated, the more likely it is to stay in long-term memory. The term given to stabilizing a trace memory after the initial acquisition, encoding, and storage is called consolidation. A memory is strengthened by increasing the number of signals that pass between neurons, resulting in their firing together more easily. The affected neurons become sensitized to each other. When experiences are accumulated, they join the familiar pathways, adding strength and creating a route of least resistance. The brain organizes itself to respond more quickly each time. The brain sends a signal, and the pituitary and adrenals release stress hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, and another word I can't pronounce, that dictate whether the body's response should be a fight, flight, or freeze response. If the freeze response is the result, the body releases painkillers called endorphins and opioids that create the body's ability either to appear dead or to dissociate. One usually comes out of this state shaking and often with little memory of the event. Trauma memories are stored in the amygdala and the hypothalamus. And yes, the primitive survival reacting part of the brain is not the thinking part of the brain, but the part that will store the memory. When something in the present occurs that triggers a past trauma, stress hormones are released that so closely resemble those that were released in the past that the body acts as if it's in the past, as it did in the past, as if it's in survival mode. One might think of this as a variant of the file folder effect. This response occurs more readily at night when the veil of the unconscious is open so that the memories of the past events can more easily flood forward. This phenomenon is called post-traumatic stress disorder. I went into freeze mode when I was being abused. I dissociated from my body in order not to be present, thus protecting myself from experiencing the pain full force. Dissociating helped me survive. However, since the body remembers, trauma memories cannot be removed simply by thinking one's way to safety and health. Throughout the first year of my marriage, my abuser, Cain, did not care if I was present or not. I was just a means to his release. I locked myself in the bedroom at one point, and he told me that if I did not let him in, he would go find a whore, that it was all the same to him. I stayed with Cain because I had already come to believe that no one else would have me, and because I now considered myself used goods. I coped by becoming hyper alert. Normally, after a trauma, the heart rate slows and sends a signal that the crisis has passed. Since my abuse took place almost daily for 3 years, the continual deluge of hormones allowed no periods of respite and calm. I entered a state of body-mind burnout, and I would immediately dissociate when threatened. I'm not sure if I ever returned to the calm state while I was with Cain. What happens now when I withdraw? Despite what I have learned and how much I have grown, my perception of threat still defaults to my feeling unsafe. A healthy, normal reaction remains just out of reach for me. When someone observes that I'm upset or withdrawn, I might be asked, "What's wrong?" Or "Where did you go?" Or "A penny for your thoughts." If I'm pushed to give a response, I might flip into the anger mode that I spoke of before. At this point, however, I've come to realize that I might be sabotaging myself as much as protecting myself if I get angry. I also understand that if I continue this behavior of leaving, I'm in danger of passing the limit on what other people are willing to tolerate. While it might be easy for someone to say, "I'm not the person who hurt you. Please don't associate me with that old memory," it's not so easy to stay and trust that the outcome will be different this time. I realize I want to create reality checks here, such as to do the be present exercise to help me differentiate between the current person and my former. I also continue to take into account that my nonverbal body memory, having been amplified by the delusional hormones, cannot be changed by thoughts alone. However, being aware of the cue that triggers the urge to leave is only a first step toward forgiving the connection. I now add to this the knowledge that leaving is no longer an option and will not contribute to my healing process. I remind myself that the past is over. Further, I practice pacing myself to avoid triggers in the future, at least until I can manage the triggers and dissolve the underlying beliefs that cause those triggers to fire. I'm not sure if I heard somebody's microphone. Michael, did you have something to say?
No, I was just breathing with you as you went through that, sweetie.
Okay. The intensity of memories of past experience are decreasing as I live in safe environments and take advantage of support. As I develop the skills of forgiveness using the tools of breathing and prayer, I feel that I'm on a path toward healing my mind, spirit, and body. That said, I recognize that while some memories may never stop inviting me to react in my body and emotions, the triggered thought does not have to dictate what I do in the present. The trigger memory has now moved into the reasoning part of my brain, where something new can be created. I have learned that the past is over, and I can now forgive, but not forget. The third one, to become aware of the unreasonable drive to please others. I often lose sight of my authenticity, giving up who I am and ignoring what I want in order to be what I think another person might want me to be and do. Who are these others? Nearly everyone in my life. Triggers were put in place early in my family, and because I wanted a peaceful home, I took it upon myself to keep everyone happy. I certainly overestimated my power, as no matter what I did, I could not please my parents, grandmother, or brothers all the time. The wish to please spread to my teachers. Starting in kindergarten and continuing through college, I tried to prove how valuable I was by overachieving. Though I was proud of my accomplishments, my teachers never seemed as impressed as I thought they should be. My bosses realized I could do whatever they asked, and thus they asked a lot, to the point where I would feel overwhelmed. However, even while they continued to expect a lot from me, I never felt I was one of the boys or girls. My big wake-up call came when my wish to please my first husband, Cain, neither made him happy nor stopped his abuse of me. I eventually realized that my self-annihilating drive to please him was not healthy for me, nor was it a way to maintain peace or hold a relationship together. Yes, I often completely forgot myself while trying to please Cain, as I could feel safe, at least outwardly, for the moment. To this day, when someone gives to me, I feel compelled to give back. Receiving does not mean owing. I tell myself reciprocating is nice, but not required. Another thing I began noticing is that my not okay doing for others is not always wanted or appreciated. If I'm told to stop, I am tempted to feel I'm unworthy or worthless. Now that I am more aware of this, I remind myself of my worth and practice being open to receiving without having to give in return. As I continue doing my forgiveness work, I am learning to make an accurate assessment of the present without letting the past contaminate it. I'm learning to separate myself from unsafe situations or relationships. I'm accepting that it's okay to say no and return to myself, remembering that I am a being, not a thing. I am love, living an inspired life, connected to and guided by my Creator. And we only have about 3 minutes, so I'll stop there and we'll continue the rest of that tomorrow. I open the floor for questions or comments.
Hi, Jeanie. This is Carrie.
Hi, Carrie.
Wow, that's so powerful.
Thank you.
I had a question about leaving. That sometimes we do need to leave, like you were saying. Sometimes we need to say no, you know?
Right.
So how would you make that distinction between when leaving is a good thing and when it's just avoidance?
I think probably looking at what emotion is triggered and stop and take a breath. And it's like, for me anyway, am I, really considering that this is the best choice for me and for my safety and sanity? Or am I just running out of fear that is probably based in the past? And if I can make the choice to leave, which, I can't honestly say that when I finally left Kane, I did leave him out of fear. And I moved constantly the first year that I was out, and not really realizing I was taking the fear with me, that it wasn't really caused by him. He was definitely a trigger, and that doesn't condone what he did, but I left him out of fear and not out of a, sane mind or whatever. But, let's say, okay, let's just say that Michael and I have a interaction, and those are getting fewer and fewer. But, at first, I don't know how many times it was like, especially at Heartland. And there was a lot of work at Heartland, and something would come up and I would be like, I'm just going to go back to Bristol, and it wasn't, he definitely didn't hurt me. He definitely, it was all my internal chaos triggered by external clutter or whatever. And so that wasn't out of a, I need to save myself. I need to take care of myself. It was just out of what was going on in my own mind, that, I don't want to deal with this, so I'm going to leave. And so I think you have to judge that for yourself, of where your emotions and your thoughts and your feelings, if you can stop and take a breath and say, okay, what's really behind this? What's the trigger?
Yeah,
And
so I worked for a few years at a battered women's refuge, and I never understood why women went back or stayed or whatever. And I think I'm beginning to understand that now, in terms of familiar patterns,
yeah,
or, oh, I can change this person. I also think it has something to do with honoring self, which we talk a lot about in Michael's work. And that when you're abused, what you've been talking about are, the feelings that, like, especially when you said, I'm used goods, I was so shocked by that. When you said that, I was like, wow, that came from the patriarchy. That's not anything women should be really feeling. That's something we've taken on. So I'm not, the message of that, I'm used goods, is I'm not worth anything. I'm not worthy. So there's a lot to unpack here. And I just hope that women reading this who see they're in an abusive situation can leave and can still do the healing work
right,
and keep themselves safe.
right. And it requires the work, because when I left and got out of that, it had been 40, 50 years, and I hadn't talked about it to anybody.
Yeah.
And finally told Michael, and but it's like, even though I didn't talk about it, and it's like even my mom, when she shared about hiding in the theater, she had never shared that with anybody. And it's like, why are we, I don't know if it's shame or what, but it runs our life. I mean, it's underneath, it's inside, and it's generating energies that are calling in for a situation to show it to us, because we need to heal it.
Hmm.
And if we're not willing to go there and look, and I'm hoping that the book gives enough information to say, hey, you can come away from this. It doesn't have to define you.
I think, though, there's also a lot of people that it's not an unwillingness to look. I think also it's like they don't know how to look. They don't know how to do anything differently. So I think your book is like a beacon of light.
I hope so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being with us, and we'll continue tomorrow. Michael, do you have something you needed to add?
No, just holding the space,
Okay.
extending breath.
Thank you, everyone. See you tomorrow.